Rachel stood in the corner of the room, her eyes flickering from one conversation to the next. She watched as her parents, as usual, fawned over her brother, Alex. He stood at the center of every group, laughing easily, his presence lighting up the room like the sun. It was his birthday, after all, and everything was focused on him. Rachel had expected it, even if it still stung. As the night wore on, Rachel couldn't help but feel the familiar ache of being invisible. She was no stranger to it. The same feeling had followed her since childhood. Her parents always spoke of Alex's accomplishments, his successes, his bright future. Rachel, on the other hand, was nothing more than a shadow in the background. She had tried over the years to stand out. She had always been the quiet one, the studious one. She had won spelling bees, excelled in math competitions, memorized the periodic table by heart. And yet, she was never acknowledged for it. Her parents rarely asked her about school, never seemed to care about the trophies she brought home. Instead, their focus was always on Alex. His grades, his charming smile, his easygoing nature. When Rachel was younger, she used to think that it was just a phase, that one day they'd notice her. But no matter how much she did, no matter how many times she put in the effort to get their attention, she was always met with indifference. She glanced over at Alex now, laughing at something their father had said. Emily, their mother, was sitting beside him, her arm wrapped around his shoulder. The three of them looked like they were in their own world, completely oblivious to Rachel's presence in the room. Rachel's fingers curled around the edge of her glass, the coolness of the wine offering some comfort in the midst of her discomfort. She glanced at the clock. It was almost time to leave. The evening had passed like so many others, filled with superficial pleasantries and polite conversation that never quite reached her heart. As she stood there, her eyes wandered to the framed picture on the wall, the one of the family on vacation. Rachel had been about 8 or 9 in that photo. Her smile had been bright, eager to be a part of the moment. Yet, even then, the camera had caught only her brother's face, the light in his eyes unmistakable, while Rachel had been an afterthought, lingering just behind him. The more she looked at the picture, the more she realized how much she had always been forgotten. And tonight, as she stood alone at the party, the weight of that realization hit her harder than ever. It was as though she were a ghost in her own home, living a life that no one saw, no one cared to acknowledge. Rachel had been used to the loneliness, but it had never stung this much. The laughter around her continued, but Rachel could no longer hear it. She was lost in her own thoughts, wondering why she had ever tried so hard. For what? For who? It was clear now that she would never be more than a distant memory in their lives. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. She glanced down at the screen, surprised to see Alex's name flashing across it. He never called her. He never reached out unless he needed something. Her heart tightened, but she swiped to answer anyway. "Hello?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. "Rach?" Alex's voice came through, strained, almost desperate. I need your help." Rachel's breath hitched. She had never heard him like this before. Alex was always so confident, always so sure of himself. To hear him this vulnerable felt out of place. "What happened?" she asked, trying to keep the concern out of her voice. She knew better than to offer too much, too quickly. "It's Dad's sick," he said, his words rushed. "He collapsed, and the hospital won't do anything until we pay them. Mom's credit card's been declined, and we don't have the money to cover it. We need you, Rachel. Please, you're the only one who can help us." Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. She had always been the one to step in when there was a crisis. Her parents knew that. She had been the one to bail them out time and time again, but this time something felt different. She could already feel the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She closed her eyes for a moment, forcing herself to breathe. This was the same old routine. Her parents would always find a way to put the burden on her, expecting her to save them from whatever mess they'd gotten themselves into. She had never been allowed to have her own life, her own moments of peace. It was always about them. But even as the thought crossed her mind, the deep-seated obligation she had been raised with took hold. She couldn't let her father suffer, not if there was anything she could do. And yet, she was torn. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "I'll send the money." A pause on the other end of the line. "Thanks, Rach. I knew I could count on you." As the call ended, Rachel stood frozen in the same spot, staring at the floor. She had done it again. She had given in, once more becoming the person who always cleaned up their mess, always stepped in when they needed her. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt hollow, like the last bit of her life was slipping away and she wasn't doing anything to stop it. Her gaze moved back to the picture on the wall, to the family that had never truly seen her. Tonight, she would help them. But tomorrow things were going to change. She couldn't keep being their backup, their safety net. She had to find a way out. And she would. It was just a matter of time. Rachel's footsteps echoed softly as she walked down the long hallway toward the living room of her childhood home. She hadn't expected to be here again. The weight of every step felt heavier than the last, as if the house itself was a reminder of all the years she had spent trying and failing to be acknowledged. The faint smell of old furniture and lemon-scented cleaner lingered in the air, reminding her of the countless times she had walked this very path, hoping to be noticed, hoping that someone, anyone, would see her for who she truly was. But today was different. Today, she wasn't coming as a daughter seeking affection or recognition. She was here out of a sense of responsibility, out of a duty that had been ingrained in her from a young age. Rachel had been the one to help, the one to fix, the one to pick up the pieces of their broken lives. She walked into the living room where her parents were sitting on the couch, their faces etched with concern. Alex, her brother, stood by the window, staring out at the street. His posture was tense, his body language screaming for attention, but Rachel knew better than to expect any sort of acknowledgement. "Thanks for coming, Rach," Alex said without turning around. His voice was strained, almost desperate. Rachel gave a small nod, though her chest tightened. Her brother's tone brought her back to all the times she had been the one to fix things, only to be met with indifference when the dust settled. It was always the same. She was the fixer, the problem solver, the one who made everything better, only for it all to be taken for granted. "We really need your help." Her father, John, spoke up, his voice low and pleading. Your mother's card got declined, and we don't have enough money to cover Dad's medical expenses. The hospital won't operate without a down payment." Rachel's eyes flicked to her mother, Emily, who was sitting with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked worried, but Rachel had seen this look before. It was the same look Emily gave whenever they needed something from her, like she was the only one who could solve their problems. Rachel swallowed hard, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. She didn't want to do this. She didn't want to be the one to fix their mistakes again. But she also couldn't bring herself to walk away. Not when her father's health was on the line. Not when they were family. "So, what exactly happened?" Rachel asked, her voice cool despite the tension rising in her chest. She needed the facts. She needed to understand what she was getting herself into. Alex turned to face her then, his expression a mixture of guilt and urgency. "I don't know, Rach. It's a mess. Dad's been sick for a while, and we've been struggling to keep up with everything. I don't know how we got here." Rachel clenched her jaw, feeling the familiar pang of frustration. She had heard it all before. Excuses, half-truths, and a constant cycle of financial mismanagement. Every time there was a crisis, she was the one who had to step in, who had to bear the burden, and every time they promised things would change. But nothing ever did. Her father, John, shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "We've been trying to keep things together, but the bills are piling up, and with your mother's credit card maxed out, we just don't know what to do. We can't lose Dad. Please, Rach, we need your help." Rachel felt the weight of his words settle deep within her. She could hear the desperation in his voice, and for a moment she felt a flicker of sympathy. But the bitterness inside her quickly rose again, drowning out the small voice of empathy. She turned away, pacing the room as her mind churned. "I don't know," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've bailed you out so many times before, and every time things just, they don't change. You keep making the same mistakes." But as the words left her mouth, she knew she couldn't turn her back on them. Not now. Not when her father's life was on the line. Rachel stopped pacing and faced them. "I'll help," she said, her voice tight. "I'll transfer the money, but I need you to be honest with me. All of you. No more secrets." Alex's eyes widened, and for a brief moment she saw a flicker of relief, but it was quickly replaced with the same indifference that had been there before. It was as if she had always been the one expected to fix things, and nothing was ever really appreciated. Rachel pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she opened her banking app. She transferred the money, feeling the familiar rush of anxiety as the numbers on the screen shifted. It was always the same. She was always the one to save them, to pull them out of their messes. But it never felt like enough. She never felt like enough. When the transaction was complete, Rachel looked at her family again. "There, the money's been transferred. But I need to know exactly what's been going on. Where did all of this debt come from?" Her parents exchanged glances, and for a brief second, Rachel could see something shift between them. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the same rehearsed explanations and half-truths they always gave. "Rachel," her mother began, her voice shaky. "We've been trying to manage everything. But with Dad's health and everything else..." Rachel didn't want to hear it anymore. She felt a sickening knot form in her stomach. "You're lying," she said quietly, more to herself than to them. "I know," Rachel said, her voice cold. "I'll transfer the money, but this isn't over. I need to know what you've really been hiding." Her mother hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly, almost as if she were bracing for something. "There's more, Rachel. Some of the bills. They were never paid. And there are other things." Rachel's heart dropped. She knew this wasn't going to end well, but she wasn't prepared for what came next. As her mother handed her a stack of documents, Rachel's eyes scanned over the pages. The bills. The missed payments. But then, something caught her eye. Something that didn't belong. A large, unexplained charge for a trip to the Bahamas. Something that wasn't even listed in their regular expenses. Rachel's blood ran cold. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Her mother's face turned pale. It was supposed to be for your father's treatment, but we didn't have enough, so we used the card." Rachel's mind spun. She knew she had to act fast, but how far had their deception gone? What else had they been hiding? The truth was beginning to unravel, and Rachel could feel the floor shift beneath her. The lies, the manipulation. It was all starting to come apart at the seams, and she was done being their fool. Rachel sat at her desk, her fingers hovering above the keyboard as her mind raced. The documents her mother had handed her earlier were still spread out across the surface, their contents seared into her memory. The Bahamas trip, the unexplained charges, the lies. She could feel the familiar tension in her chest again, the kind that had been there for as long as she could remember, but it had never been so sharp, so raw. For years, she had been the one who always stepped in, who always helped, without question, without hesitation. But now, everything had changed. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had been off from the start. It was one thing to help family in times of need, but it was another to be manipulated, to be used as an ATM for their poor decisions and their lies. Rachel opened her laptop and quickly typed in the password. Her fingers moved with purpose as she pulled up the latest bank statements she had secretly gathered over the past few days. The way her mother had handed her the documents earlier had felt so rehearsed. Rachel knew she couldn't trust any of it, not without verifying it herself. The more she dug into the transactions, the more questions piled up. payments to a few unfamiliar companies, amounts that were far too high for regular expenses. She narrowed her eyes, scrolling down the long list. There it was. Another charge for the Bahamas trip, but this time, there were multiple payments. The total was staggering. Rachel leaned in closer to the screen. She felt a cold wave of realization wash over her. The trip hadn't been for her father's treatment at all. It was a lie. It wasn't the first time she had been lied to, but something about this hit harder than the others. It was one thing to be ignored, another to be lied to. But it was entirely different to know they had been using her as a pawn in their financial game. Her hand trembled as she clicked on a link to a document she hadn't noticed before, a payment history for a credit card linked to her mother's name. Rachel quickly scanned the details. There it was again. The same name, the same location. It had been billed as a family vacation, but the amount was far too high for just a few days. And why hadn't Rachel been told about it? Why hadn't her parents ever mentioned the cost of the trip when they were begging her for help? Her stomach twisted. The truth was becoming clearer, and it felt like someone had just torn the floor out from under her. They had been living a lie. She had been helping them, and all the while they had been hiding their debts, their extravagances, and worst of all, using her as the fall guy, the one who would always come through when things went wrong. Why didn't I see this sooner? Rachel muttered under her breath, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Her mind flashed back to all the times she had been the one to fix things, to bail them out, to step in without question. Every time she had helped, it had been the same. No thanks, no recognition, just the silent expectation that she would always be there. Always. Rachel turned to the next document. She had learned to recognize the patterns by now. There were multiple charges to the same company, multiple transactions that were marked as family expenses. But the more she looked at them, the more she saw that these weren't just for things like medical care or home repairs. They were for unnecessary purchases, luxury vacations, expensive dinners, shopping sprees. Things that had nothing to do with the financial strain they had claimed to be in. Rachel's phone buzzed. It was a text from Elise, her old friend, and the one person she trusted more than anyone else. Rachel had confided in Elise about her family's struggles, and now, Elise had become her quiet partner in this investigation. Rachel quickly typed a response. I think I found something. Can you meet me in an hour? Elise replied almost instantly. On my way. Rachel took a deep breath and ran her hands through her hair, trying to calm the storm of emotions that were building inside of her. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Elise was her only ally in all of this, the only person who could help her make sense of the mess her family had created. She wasn't going to go through this alone. Not anymore. As she waited, Rachel scrolled through the documents again, trying to connect the dots. She could feel the pieces falling into place. Her family's lies, their manipulation. She had spent so many years helping them, always thinking they needed her, that they loved her. But now she realized it had all been a facade. They didn't need her. They had just been using her to get what they wanted. Her phone buzzed again. It was a call from Elise this time. Rachel picked it up immediately, eager for any kind of confirmation. Rachel, Elise said, her voice steady but concerned. I've been going through some of the things you sent me. There's more to this than you realize. I think your parents have been hiding a lot more than just money. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What else could they be hiding? I found some emails between your mom and a financial advisor, Elise said. They've been funneling money into a secret account. I think they were planning on using you as a way to cover up their mess. Maybe even keep you in the dark so they wouldn't have to face the consequences. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. They're planning to use me again, aren't they? I think they already have, Elise replied. But we can fix this, Rachel. You can expose them. You just need the right evidence. Rachel stared at the screen, her mind racing. She had been right all along. They had been using her, but now the tables were about to turn. I'm going to confront them, Rachel said, her voice full of resolve. but I need to know what else they've been hiding. I need to know everything." As she hung up, Rachel looked over the documents one last time. Her heart was pounding, but she could feel the weight lifting off her shoulders. The truth was out there now, and it was time to bring it into the light. She wasn't going to let her family control her anymore. She was done being their pawn. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, her fingers gripping the edge as she tried to steady the rapid beat of her heart. Across from her, her family was gathered, the same faces she had known her entire life. Yet tonight, they felt like strangers. Alex sat with his arms crossed, his gaze distant. Her father, John, was nervously twiddling his fingers, his eyes avoiding hers. And Emily, her mother, kept glancing at Rachel with a mixture of guilt and apprehension, as if she could sense what was coming. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating. Rachel could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, each second stretching on endlessly as she steeled herself for what she was about to do. She had waited too long for this moment, and now it was time to confront them. No more lies, no more excuses. She took a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice steady but full of resolve. "I know what you've been doing. All of it. I know about the credit card bills, the secret payments, the vacation you took with money that wasn't yours to spend." Her parents froze, the blood draining from their faces as the words sank in. Alex, who had been avoiding her gaze, now looked up, his expression shifting to one of panic. He opened his mouth to say something, but Rachel cut him off before he could speak. "I've been going through the records, everything," Rachel continued, her voice growing stronger. "I've been watching the transactions, seeing the way you've been using me to cover up your messes. The vacations, the shopping sprees, all of it." Rachel's words hung in the air like a storm ready to break. She could feel the tension radiating from her parents, their discomfort palpable. But there was something else in the room now, something that hadn't been there before. It was power. Rachel was no longer the weak, overlooked daughter. She was the one holding all the cards, and she was done playing their game. "I've transferred the money to cover Dad's medical bills, but I want answers," Rachel said, her voice unwavering. "How could you do this to me? After everything I've done for you? Every time you called me, every time you needed help, I was there. But this is a betrayal. You've been using me." John shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and finally spoke, his voice low and defensive. "Rachel, you're overreacting. We never meant for you to find out. We didn't want you to worry. We didn't want to burden you with all of this." Rachel's eyes narrowed, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Burden me? You've been burdening me for years. I've been bailing you out since I was old enough to understand money. You made me the one who always had to fix everything, and you never once thought about how that made me feel." Her father avoided her gaze, his hands trembling slightly. Emily, on the other hand, looked straight at Rachel, her face a mix of regret and frustration. "We were trying to protect you," Emily said, her voice cracking. "We didn't want you to know about our problems. We wanted you to live your life, to be successful. But we got in over our heads. And when things started to fall apart, we didn't know who else to turn to. You've always been the strong one, Rachel. The one who never needed help." Rachel's heart twisted painfully at her mother's words. The years of being told she was strong had always weighed on her, but now she saw it for what it was, an excuse to lean on her without ever giving anything in return. She had been the one who was never allowed to falter, never allowed to break. She had been the one to bear their burdens while they pretended everything was fine. They had used her strength as a crutch, never acknowledging how exhausting it had been to constantly be the pillar that held everything up. "And that's exactly why you never saw it, isn't it?" Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with a biting clarity. "You thought I'd always be there. You thought I'd never question what you were doing, but I'm not your backup anymore. I'm not your safety net. Not anymore." The room fell silent again, the weight of Rachel's words pressing down on her family. Alex shifted uncomfortably, looking between his parents and Rachel, but he didn't say anything. He had been a silent participant in this, as if he had been waiting for Rachel to fix things for him too. "Rachel, please." Emily's voice trembled. "We were just trying to survive. We didn't want to put you in the middle of this." "I didn't ask to be in the middle of it," Rachel shot back. "You made that choice for me. Every time I bailed you out. Every time I sacrificed my own life for you, you made that choice for me." Her father opened his mouth to respond, but Rachel wasn't finished. She could feel the anger bubbling inside her, the years of frustration finally finding an outlet. "I'm done," she said firmly. "I'm done being the one who fixes everything. I'm done letting you use me. You don't get to manipulate me anymore." She stood up from the table, her legs steady beneath her. "I'm going to expose everything. I'll take this to court. I'll take it to the media. I'm going to make sure the world knows what you've been doing." Her parents' faces went pale. They had known Rachel to be strong, but they had never imagined she would go this far. For the first time, Rachel saw fear in their eyes, and it felt like a small victory. They were the ones who had always controlled her, always kept her in her place. But now she was in control, and they would have to face the consequences of their actions. "I don't care what happens anymore," Rachel said, her voice low and steady. "I've spent too long helping you. It's time for you to deal with the mess you created." As she gathered the documents, preparing to go public with the evidence, Rachel's resolve hardened. She was going to bring her family to justice. It was time to expose the truth. No more silence. No more lies. Rachel sat in the corner of the dimly lit coffee shop, her fingers tapping anxiously on the tabletop. The warm scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air, but it did little to soothe her nerves. She had been waiting for Elise for what felt like hours, her mind spinning with the weight of the decisions she had made. Today, everything would change. Today, she would expose her family. The lies, the manipulation, the years of being used. She looked down at the stack of documents she had gathered. Emails, bank statements, photos, and texts. They were all there. The proof of what her family had done. The truth that they had so desperately tried to hide. It was all in her hands now, and there was no going back. The door to the coffee shop chimed as it opened, and Rachel's head snapped up. Elise walked in. Her face lit up with a small, reassuring smile as she spotted Rachel. Elise was the one person Rachel trusted completely. The one person who had always had her back, no matter what. "Sorry I'm late," Elise said as she slid into the seat across from Rachel. "Traffic was a nightmare, but I got what you needed." She placed a folder on the table, its contents spilling out slightly, each piece of evidence a small victory in the battle ahead. Rachel nodded, her gaze focused on the folder. She reached for it, opening it carefully. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," Rachel whispered. "It feels surreal." Elise leaned in closer, her voice low and serious. "It's the right thing to do, Rachel. You've been carrying their weight for far too long. They need to face the consequences of what they've done." Rachel's fingers brushed over the papers. She had always known something was wrong, but seeing the cold, hard facts laid out in front of her was different. It made everything so real. The years of being ignored, the years of cleaning up their mess, all of it had led to this moment. She had always been the one to help them, never once asking for anything in return. But now, as she stared at the evidence, it was clear that her family had never seen her as anything more than a tool to be used. Rachel thought back to all the times she had given everything she had, money, time, energy, and never once received any acknowledgement. Her parents had always made it clear that Alex was the favored one, the golden child. She was just there. Always invisible, always secondary. But no more. No more would she be the one left to pick up the pieces. Today, she would take control. "I've been thinking," Rachel said, her voice gaining strength. "I'm not just going to confront them. I'm going to go public with this. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what they've done. I've already sent the first round of documents to a reporter I trust." Elise raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You're going all in, huh?" Rachel nodded, her eyes dark with determination. I have to. They can't keep doing this to me. To all of us. I've spent my whole life being their safety net, their emergency fund, but I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done. Elise placed her hand on Rachel's, giving it a reassuring squeeze. I'm with you. All the way. Just as Rachel was about to speak again, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart skip a beat. It was Alex. Without thinking, she answered the call. Hello? Rachel. Alex's voice came through, tight and strained. What are you doing? I heard rumors. Are you seriously going to ruin everything? You don't want to do this. Rachel felt the familiar rush of frustration and anger bubble up inside her, but she held her ground. I'm not ruining anything. You and Mom and Dad have been lying to me for years. I'm just finally doing what's right. You don't know what you're talking about, Alex said quickly. This isn't the way to handle it. Don't do this. I'm telling you, if you go through with this, you'll lose everything. You'll lose us. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. His words were meant to intimidate her, to make her doubt her decision. But she wasn't going to back down. Not anymore. I've already lost everything, Rachel said, her voice steady. I've lost my family, my trust, my dignity. What more is there to lose? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Rachel could almost hear Alex's breath catch in his throat. Then he spoke again, his voice low and cold. You're making a big mistake, Rachel. If you keep going, you'll regret it. You don't know what we're capable of. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't let his words scare her. Instead, they steeled her resolve. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Alex. I'm done being your backup. I'm done being your fool. I'm going to expose everything. With that, she hung up, the finality of her decision hanging in the air. She looked at Elise, who had been watching her closely throughout the call. Elise, Rachel said, her voice firm. We're doing this. We're going to make sure everyone knows the truth, no matter what happens. Elise nodded, her expression full of determination. You've got this. You've already won by deciding to take control. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions that were swirling inside of her. She had made the decision. She was no longer the silent observer. She was going to make her family face the consequences of their actions. She was going to expose them all. But as she sat there with the weight of everything she had discovered pressing on her shoulders, she knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. Rachel sat hunched over her desk in her office, the glow from her computer screen casting an eerie light on her face. The room was silent except for the faint clicking of the mouse and the rhythmic tapping of her fingers as she scrolled through the financial documents in front of her. She had been at this for hours, reviewing each statement, cross-checking the numbers. But the more she dug, the more questions arose. Her eyes narrowed as she clicked on another link to a new transaction that had caught her attention. It was a payment to an offshore account, one that was listed under a name she didn't recognize. She had already uncovered several of these, but this one was different. The amount was significant. Too large to be an ordinary transaction. This was the kind of money that couldn't just disappear without a trace. Rachel's pulse quickened. She had always known her family wasn't transparent with her. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. She copied the transaction details into a separate file, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the pattern. Her phone buzzed beside her, startling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Elise. Elise. I found something. Meet me at the coffee shop in an hour. Rachel quickly typed back, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to calm her nerves. Got it. Be there soon. She couldn't afford to make mistakes. Every moment counted. She had to stay ahead, stay one step closer to the truth. The weight of what she was doing settled in her chest again, the risk of being caught, of being exposed. If her family ever found out what she was doing, the consequences would be severe. But she couldn't stop now. Too much was at stake. Rachel pulled up the next batch of documents, bank statements from the past year. As she flipped through them, her heart skipped a beat when she noticed a large sum of money withdrawn from their joint account. The amount was staggering, and there was no explanation listed for the withdrawal. No note, no receipt, no justification. Just the transaction number and a date, the same offshore account from the previous transaction. Her breath caught in her throat as she began to connect the dots. This wasn't just about a few missing funds here and there. This was about something much bigger. They were laundering money, using her as a cover, all while pretending to be struggling, pretending to need her help. All the while, they had been pocketing large sums without her knowledge. Rachel's mind was spinning, but she forced herself to focus. She needed more proof. One transaction wasn't enough. But what she had now, combined with the other documents Elise had helped her gather, was a solid lead. As she continued to sift through the financial records, she heard the familiar ping of an incoming call. It was from Alex. She hesitated for a moment before answering, feeling a flicker of dread run through her. "What do you want, Alex?" she said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the tension in her chest. "Rach, I need to talk to you. There's something I think you should know," he said, his voice sounding oddly nervous. Rachel's heart raced. "I'm busy, Alex. I don't have time for your games right now." "No, it's not like that," Alex said quickly. I think you're doing something that could really hurt the family. You've got to stop. This isn't the way to handle things." Rachel froze. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" There was a long pause before Alex spoke again, his voice quieter now. "I know what you're doing. I know you're looking into our finances. And you need to stop, Rachel. If you don't, it's not just you who'll be hurt. Do you really want to go this far? Do you want to destroy everything?" Rachel's mind raced. How did he know? Had someone been spying on her? Or worse, had they figured out what she was doing? "I'm not going to stop, Alex," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You've used me for far too long, and I'm not going to let you get away with it anymore." "You don't understand what you're doing," Alex insisted. "You're pushing us to a breaking point. You don't know what will happen if you expose us. I'm telling you, you'll regret it." Rachel didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced at the documents on her screen, her fingers hovering over the keys. She could feel the walls closing in on her, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Not like she used to be. Not when the truth was finally within reach. "I'll take my chances," she said finally, her voice low and filled with resolve. "I'm not afraid of you, Alex. You can't scare me anymore." The call ended abruptly, and Rachel stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The threats had already started, and she knew it wouldn't be the last time Alex tried to intimidate her. But it didn't matter. She had made her decision. There was no turning back now. Rachel stood up, grabbing her jacket and heading for the door. She needed to meet Elise. They had work to do, and it was time to bring everything to light. The drive to the coffee shop felt like it took forever, but soon Rachel was parking outside, her nerves on edge as she walked inside. Elise was already sitting at a corner table, her eyes scanning through some papers, clearly deep in thought. "Hey," Rachel said as she sat down, trying to keep her composure. "I've got something." Elise raised an eyebrow, immediately sensing the seriousness in Rachel's tone. "What did you find?" Rachel pulled out the documents she had gathered and laid them out on the table between them. Elise's eyes widened as she skimmed through the papers, her lips parting in disbelief. "Rachel," Elise said slowly, her voice filled with shock. "This is huge. We have everything we need." Rachel nodded, her mind focused. "I'm going to expose them. I'm not just going to stop at confronting them. I'll go public with this. They won't be able to get away with it anymore." But just as she said the words, a sudden feeling of dread crept up her spine. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Elise asked quietly. "Once it's out, there's no going back." Rachel took a deep breath, her resolve firming. "I've been living in their shadow for too long. I'm not going to let them control me anymore. I'm doing this for me." As Rachel stood to leave, she suddenly felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She pulled it out, her breath catching when she saw the caller ID. Alex. Don't back down, Rachel. You'll regret it. His voice came through the speaker, cold and filled with menace. Rachel's grip tightened around the phone. She knew this was just the beginning, but she wasn't afraid anymore. I'm not backing down, she said, her voice steady. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. As she ended the call, she looked at Elise, her eyes hard with determination. The storm was coming, but Rachel was ready. Rachel sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop illuminating her face as she stared at the blank screen. The tension in the room was palpable, her heart racing in her chest as she typed the words. She had been planning this for days, calculating every move, and now the moment had arrived. She was going to send her family the first message, the first warning, that everything they had worked so hard to keep hidden was about to be exposed. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before she typed, carefully choosing each word. I know everything. The truth is coming. You can't hide anymore. Rachel. She sat back in her chair, reading the message again. It wasn't much, just enough to plant a seed of doubt, a hint that she was onto them. She wasn't going to come right out with everything. Not yet. That would come soon enough. But for now, she needed them to panic. She needed them to feel the fear that had gripped her for years. The fear of being overlooked, of being used, of being kept in the shadows while they did whatever they pleased. She exhaled slowly and pressed send. Her hand trembled as she closed the email window. It was done. For a moment, Rachel allowed herself to sit in the silence that followed. She had spent so much of her life trying to fix things for them, trying to earn their love, only to be taken for granted. Now, she was the one in control, the one making the decisions. She wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. She had the power to expose their lies, and she was going to use it. Just then, her phone buzzed on the desk, interrupting the heavy silence. It was a text from Elise. Elise. How did it go? Have you sent it? Rachel quickly typed back, her fingers flying over the screen. Yes, I've sent the first message. Let's see how they react. She felt a strange sense of satisfaction as she sent the message. This was it. This was the beginning of her counterattack. A few moments later, Elise called and Rachel quickly answered. Hey, Rachel said, trying to keep her voice steady. It's done. I've sent the message. Good, Elise said, her voice calm but firm. Now we wait. They'll react, and when they do, we'll be ready. Rachel paced back and forth, the anticipation making her restless. The phone call with Alex earlier was still fresh in her mind, his threats echoing in her ears. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had done enough, learned enough, and gathered enough evidence to bring them all down. I'm going to stay on top of this, Rachel said, her voice determined. I'll be ready for whatever comes next. You're strong, Rachel, Elise said. You've got this, and I'll help you every step of the way. Rachel smiled at Elise's words, grateful for the support. Elise had been the only one to believe in her, to see the strength that Rachel had always kept hidden. And now, she wasn't hiding anymore. A sudden knock at the door jolted Rachel from her thoughts. She froze for a second, unsure of what to do. Her heart raced as she glanced at the clock. It was late, and there was no reason for anyone to be at her door. She cautiously walked over and opened it, only to find Alex standing on the other side. His face was tight with frustration, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. Rachel, Alex said, his voice laced with anger. We need to talk. Rachel's stomach flipped. She had known this moment would come. He had probably already seen the email, and now he was here to confront her, to try to intimidate her into backing down. I'm listening, Rachel said, crossing her arms over her chest, trying to steady herself. Alex's eyes flashed with a mix of disbelief and frustration. You think this is a game, don't you? He snapped. You're messing with things you don't understand. You don't know what's at stake here. Rachel raised an eyebrow, refusing to let him see how much his words affected her. "Oh, I think I understand perfectly. You and Mom and Dad have been using me for years, Alex. You've been hiding things from me, manipulating me, and I've had enough." "You have no idea what you're doing," Alex shot back, his voice rising. "If you keep going with this, you'll ruin everything. I won't let you do it." Rachel stood her ground, her eyes narrowing. "What are you going to do, Alex? Try to intimidate me again? Because it's not going to work. I'm done being your backup. I'm done letting you manipulate me." Alex took a step closer, his face reddening. "You're making a huge mistake. If you don't stop, I swear you'll regret it. I'll make sure of it." Rachel felt a flash of anger rise up within her, but she fought to keep her voice calm. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm not afraid of any of you." Alex glared at her for a moment, his jaw clenched in frustration. "You think you've got everything figured out, huh? Well, let me tell you something, Rachel. You don't know who you're messing with." Before Rachel could respond, Alex turned and stormed off, disappearing down the hallway. The door slammed behind him, and Rachel stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this was just the beginning. Alex's threats were just the first of many to come, and Rachel was ready for whatever he had planned. As she walked back to her desk, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Alex. She hesitated before answering, knowing what was coming. His voice was cold when it came through. "Don't think for a second that you've won, Rachel," Alex said. "I won't let you succeed in this. You're going to regret this. I'm going to make sure of it." Rachel's grip tightened around the phone. "I'm not going anywhere, Alex. I'm done being your fool. This time, you're going to face the consequences." She hung up the phone, her heart racing. She had sent her message. Now the game was on. There was no turning back. The courthouse loomed ahead like a fortress, its stone walls towering high into the gray sky. Rachel stood at the entrance, her hand clutching the thick folder of evidence she had spent weeks assembling. Each page inside the folder was a piece of the truth, a puzzle that she had painstakingly put together. She had crossed every T and dotted every I, and now the moment had come. Today wasn't just about confronting her family. It was about making them face what they had done. The years of manipulation, the lies, the exploitation. It all had to come to light. And she was the one who was going to make sure it did. "Are you ready for this?" Elise asked quietly, her voice steady but filled with a hint of concern. She had been by Rachel's side throughout this entire process, offering support when Rachel needed it most. Rachel nodded, taking a deep breath. She had thought long and hard about this. The confrontation, the legal battle. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. If she didn't do this now, her family would never change. They would keep using her, keep controlling her, and Rachel couldn't let that happen anymore. "I have to be," Rachel replied, her voice firm. "This is the only way to make them listen. They've ignored me for far too long. It's time to expose them for who they really are." Elise gave her a reassuring smile. "You've got this. And you're not doing it alone. You have the truth on your side." The courthouse doors opened with a heavy creak, and Rachel stepped inside. Her heart pounded with every step she took down the long hallway. This place, filled with history and justice, felt like the right setting for the battle she was about to face. She had been preparing for this moment for so long, but now that it was here, she could feel the weight of what she was about to do. As she reached the courtroom, her lawyer, Mr. Holloway, was waiting for her. He was a tall, no-nonsense man, always dressed in sharp suits that matched his sharp mind. He had been the one who helped her put everything together, the one who believed in her when she thought no one else would. "Ms. Bennett," Mr. Holloway said with a nod as he shook her hand. "Everything is in order. The evidence we've gathered will hold up in court. We're ready." Rachel nodded, her eyes scanning the room. Alex and her parents were already seated, their expressions tense, their eyes darting nervously in her direction. It was clear they had no idea just how much Rachel had uncovered. They had thought they could keep everything hidden, that they could continue using her as their financial lifeline without consequences. But now, Rachel had the upper hand. She took a seat across from them, her folder of evidence placed in front of her like a weapon. As the lawyer for her family began to speak, Rachel felt her pulse quicken. This was it. The first step toward taking back control of her life. "The matter at hand is clear," Mr. Holloway began, his voice strong and commanding. "Ms. Rachel Bennett has gathered sufficient evidence of financial fraud and manipulation by her family. We are here to address the serious breach of trust, misuse of funds, and a complete disregard for Ms. Bennett's well-being." Rachel could see her parents exchange uneasy glances. Her father, John, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, while her mother, Emily, kept her gaze fixed on the table in front of her, her hands folded tightly. But it was Alex's reaction that caught Rachel's attention. He was unusually quiet, his expression tight, his jaw clenched in anger. "Rachel," Alex finally spoke, his voice sharp. "You don't know what you're doing. You're going to destroy this family. You've always been the one who held us together, and now you're tearing us apart." Rachel's heart twisted at his words, but she didn't let herself show it. She had heard these pleas too many times before. They were nothing more than manipulations, attempts to make her feel guilty for standing up for herself. She had spent years being the one to fix everything, to hold her family together, and look where it had gotten her: ignored, used, and cast aside. "No, Alex," Rachel said, her voice unwavering. "I'm not destroying this family. You and Mom and Dad have been doing that for years. You've been using me as a tool, and I'm done letting you. It's time you face the truth." Alex shot her a glare, his hands clenched into fists. "You don't understand. You think you have all the answers, but you don't. You'll regret this, Rachel. I promise you." Rachel stood tall, her resolve hardening. "No, Alex, I'm not backing down. You've had your chance to make things right, but you chose not to. This is my time now, and the truth will come out." Mr. Holloway cleared his throat, stepping forward. "We've already prepared the documents for the court, including the evidence of financial mismanagement and fraud. We have witnesses and experts who will testify. There is no more room for denial." The tension in the room was palpable. Her family had nothing left to say, nothing left to hide. It was all coming to an end. They had thought they could keep Rachel in the dark forever, but now they were facing the consequences of their actions. As Rachel gathered her documents, ready to present them in court, she glanced once more at her parents and Alex. They looked nervous, their masks of confidence slipping. But Rachel wasn't done yet. She was only getting started. Before the session could end, Alex turned to her, his voice low but filled with venom. "You won't win, Rachel. You think you have everything, but you're wrong. I won't let you do this." Rachel felt a cold shiver run down her spine, but she didn't flinch. "You've already lost, Alex. This isn't about winning or losing. This is about justice." As the courtroom session continued, Rachel's mind raced. She had the truth. She had the evidence. But the fight was far from over. The family she had once loved was now her greatest adversary, and they wouldn't stop at anything to silence her. She had only just begun to expose them, and she wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. Rachel sat in the quiet, dimly lit law office, her fingers drumming nervously against the armrest of her chair. Mr. Holloway sat across from her, looking over the stack of documents she had provided. Documents that were the key to her legal case. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the tension of everything that was riding on this moment. They had made great strides, but Rachel knew that the battle was far from over. Her family wasn't going to roll over easily, and she could already feel that they were planning something. "You've done everything right so far, Rachel," Mr. Holloway said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a tension in the air that even he couldn't deny. "We have the evidence, the witnesses. This is solid. But your family, they have connections. They won't just sit back and let this happen." Rachel sighed, feeling the weight of his words settle deep inside her. She had known this was coming. Her family wasn't just wealthy. They were influential. They had a network of people who could make life difficult for anyone who challenged them. The more Rachel thought about it, the more she realized that her fight for justice wasn't just going to be legal, it was going to be personal, too. I know, Rachel muttered. They've never been ones to just accept defeat. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their image, their wealth, but they've never had to face anyone like me before. Mr. Holloway gave a small nod, but his expression remained serious. Alex has already started making moves. His lawyers have contacted mine. They're not trying to win the case. They're trying to delay it, throw obstacles in your way, and intimidate you into backing down. Rachel clenched her fists, her frustration rising. Of course they are. It's always the same with them. They don't want the truth to come out because they're afraid of losing everything. They'll do anything to keep up the facade. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. I'm not backing down. I've been their safety net for too long, and now they'll see what happens when I finally stand up for myself. As if on cue, Rachel's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and saw Alex's name. She had expected this. The call. The confrontation. He had to know that the walls were closing in. Rachel's heart rate quickened, but she didn't hesitate. She swiped the screen to answer. Rachel. Alex's voice came through, smooth but filled with an edge of tension. I think we need to talk. Talk about what, Alex? Rachel's voice was calm, but underneath it was a controlled fury. She had been waiting for this moment. You're making a huge mistake, Alex said, his voice lowering slightly. You're not going to win this. You're going up against more than just us. You're going up against people who have the power to destroy you. Rachel felt a chill crawl up her spine, but she didn't let it show. What are you trying to say, Alex? There was a long pause before Alex spoke again, his words deliberate. I've spoken to some people, Rachel. People who have influence in the legal world. They're going to make sure this case doesn't go anywhere. They'll make sure you never get your day in court. Rachel's stomach twisted as his words sank in. Her family wasn't just using their connections to stall the process. They were pulling strings behind the scenes to make sure she didn't succeed. They were playing dirty. But Rachel wasn't about to let them win. Is that a threat, Alex? Rachel asked, her voice cold, the fury she felt bubbling just beneath the surface. It's a warning, he replied, his voice sharp. You've been warned, Rachel. You're pushing things too far, and if you don't stop, things are going to get a lot worse for you. Don't say I didn't warn you. With that, he hung up. Rachel sat in stunned silence for a moment, her mind racing as she processed his words. They weren't just trying to defeat her in court. They were trying to destroy her reputation, her career, everything she had built for herself. Alex had always been good at playing dirty. But this was something else entirely. I didn't expect them to back off, but this is more than I anticipated, Rachel said, her voice steady but with a hint of disbelief. They're going to use their power to ruin me, to ruin everything I've worked for. Mr. Holloway nodded gravely. It's clear they're using their influence to intimidate you, but they can't stop the truth. You have the evidence, and you have the law on your side. You can't let them manipulate you. Rachel stood up, a wave of determination sweeping over her. She had expected this, in a way. Her family had always been about power, about control. But Rachel wasn't going to let them win this time. She wasn't going to let them silence her. Not now. Not when she was so close. I'm not backing down, Rachel said firmly. This ends now. They'll see that I won't be intimidated. I won't let them control me anymore. Elise called just as Rachel was about to sit down again. How's it going? She asked. They're coming at me with everything they've got, Rachel replied, her voice filled with resolve. But I'm not backing down. I'll fight them in court, and I'll expose them for who they really are. Elise's voice softened. You're doing the right thing. I'm with you, Rachel. Whatever they throw at you, you don't have to do this alone. Rachel smiled slightly at her friend's words, feeling the weight of her decision settle in her chest. Thanks, Elise. But now I need to step up my game. I need to hit them back harder. We can't let them get away with this. As she hung up, Rachel turned to Mr. Holloway. We need to make a plan. I'm not just going to let them bully me into submission. We need to be ready for whatever they throw our way. I agree, Mr. Holloway said, his eyes narrowing. We'll gather more evidence, more witnesses, and we'll go public with it all. They're trying to play the game, but they've underestimated you. You're not going down without a fight. Rachel nodded. Let's get to work. As she prepared for the legal battle ahead, a familiar chill ran down her spine. She knew this was just the beginning. Alex's threats had only fueled her determination. But now she had more than just her anger driving her. She had a plan. A plan that would expose her family's lies once and for all. As she walked out of the office, her phone buzzed again, a message from Alex. Alex, you're making a mistake. This isn't over, Rachel. I'll make sure you lose. Rachel stared at the screen, her jaw clenched. She didn't need to respond. His words only confirmed one thing. He was scared. And that meant she was winning. The courtroom was colder than Rachel expected, the air thick with the weight of anticipation. She sat at the front, her fingers nervously brushing over the stack of papers in front of her. Each one was a piece of evidence, a piece of the truth. Her family, her parents and Alex, sat across the room, their faces a mixture of anger and fear. They had no idea how much she knew, how much she had uncovered, and for the first time in years, Rachel felt the power shift in her favor. The law office had been buzzing all morning, preparing for this moment. Mr. Holloway had been reassuring her, telling her that they had everything in place for a strong case. But Rachel wasn't sure. It was one thing to gather the evidence and another to face her family in this setting. The tension in the room was suffocating, the gavel poised above the judge's hand as if it was waiting for the right moment to strike. Rachel had always been the one to clean up after her family's mistakes, the one to cover for them when they messed up. But today, things were different. She wasn't going to be the silent observer. She wasn't going to sit quietly while they used her as their financial fallback. Today, she was going to make them face the truth. Alex leaned over to his parents, speaking in hushed tones. His words were barely audible, but Rachel caught the sharpness in his voice. His usual confidence had vanished, replaced by a thin veneer of fear. He knew this was it, the moment when all their secrets would be exposed. As the courtroom began to fill with more people, witnesses, lawyers, and journalists, Rachel could feel the weight of their stares, the eyes that had always looked at her as if she was nothing more than a tool for their convenience. But now, she wasn't just another cog in the wheel. She was the one holding the key to their downfall. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Rachel straightened her back, trying to steady her breathing. She was ready for this. She had to be. Court is now in session, the judge said in a firm voice. The gavel slammed down, and the proceedings began. Mr. Holloway stood first, walking up to the podium with a calm, composed air that gave Rachel a momentary sense of confidence. She knew that he had been preparing for this moment his entire career. He had always been the one to guide her, and today, he was her anchor. We are here today to present evidence of financial fraud and manipulation by the Bennett family, Mr. Holloway began. My client, Ms. Rachel Bennett, has been the victim of years of financial exploitation, and we intend to prove that today. Rachel watched as her family shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Her father, John, was fidgeting with his tie, his face flushed with anger, while her mother, Emily, sat stiffly, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Alex, however, sat with his arms crossed, his face hard and expressionless. But Rachel could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his gaze kept darting toward her, as if he couldn't believe she had come this far. Rachel, Mr. Holloway said, turning to her. You may begin. Rachel took a deep breath as she stood up. She could feel the weight of the room on her shoulders, the eyes of the courtroom on her. She had always been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background, but today she wasn't going to let her family hide anymore. She was done being silent. She walked up to the podium, feeling the eyes of her family burning into her back. For a brief moment, she thought about all the times she had stayed silent for them. When they asked her to bail them out, when they made excuses for their actions, when they made her feel like she was the problem. But today, it was her turn to speak the truth. I have spent my entire life helping my family, Rachel began, her voice strong but calm. I have given everything to make sure you are all okay, even when you never appreciated it. And for years, I've been ignored, used, and taken advantage of. But today, I'm not going to sit back anymore. She pulled the stack of documents in front of her, carefully laying them out for everyone to see. This is the truth, she said, her voice unwavering. The financial records, the bank statements, the emails. I have everything. My family has been stealing from me, using me as their safety net while pretending everything was fine. I've paid for vacations, medical bills, and even things I didn't know about, all under the assumption that you needed help. But I've learned the truth. You didn't need help. You needed to cover up your own mistakes. There was a stir in the courtroom as the audience murmured. Rachel could see her parents' faces go pale, their eyes widening with realization. Alex shifted in his seat, his jaw clenched tightly. The truth was coming, and there was no stopping it now. Rachel continued, her voice steady. I trusted you. I believed that we were a family, that we helped each other. But all along, I was just your backup. You took advantage of my kindness, of my willingness to always help. And now it's time for you to face the consequences. She turned toward the judge, her gaze unwavering. I am asking for justice, for the years of deceit, for the manipulation, and for everything they've done to me and to themselves. They used me as their pawn, and now I'm standing up for myself. Alex suddenly stood, his face flushed with anger. You don't know what you're talking about, he shouted, his voice rising. You have no idea what you're doing. You think you can just ruin our lives like this? You think you're some kind of hero, but you're just a... Enough, the judge interjected, his voice firm. Mr. Bennett, you will sit down. Alex's face reddened with fury, but he sat back down, glaring at Rachel. She didn't flinch. She had expected this. This was just the beginning of the fight. Mr. Holloway stood once more, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Your Honor, we have compiled evidence that proves Rachel Bennett was misled, manipulated, and financially exploited by her family. We have witnesses who can corroborate her story, and we ask the court to hold the defendants accountable for their actions. As Mr. Holloway finished, the judge turned to Rachel. Ms. Bennett, we will need you to provide additional evidence to support your claims. We may need to adjourn the case to ensure that all the information is presented. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She had known this might happen, but it still felt like a blow. She wasn't finished yet. She had everything they needed. She wasn't backing down now. Of course, Your Honor, Rachel said, her voice firm. I have everything you need. I'll be more than happy to provide whatever is required. As she sat down, she could feel the weight of the moment settling over her. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about standing up for herself, for everything she had endured, and for everyone who had ever been taken advantage of. But as she glanced at Alex sitting across from her, his eyes burning with anger, she knew this wasn't over yet. He was going to fight back, and the next round of this battle was going to be even harder than the last. The courtroom was silent, save for the soft rustle of papers and the occasional shuffle of feet. Rachel sat at the defendant's table, her back straight, her hands folded in front of her. She could feel the weight of the eyes on her, all of them watching, waiting. Today was the day the truth would be revealed. The day her family would be forced to face everything they had tried to hide for so long. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with anticipation and unspoken fears. Rachel had expected this, expected the moment to feel like a storm ready to break. But nothing could have prepared her for the rush of emotions that came with standing here in the very place where her family would be held accountable. The judge's gavel struck sharply, and the trial officially began. We are here today to address the financial fraud and manipulation perpetuated by the defendants, the Bennett family. Mr. Holloway's voice echoed across the room as he stood tall and composed at the podium. My client, Ms. Rachel Bennett, has presented a case filled with clear evidence. We intend to show that her family has been taking advantage of her generosity, manipulating her into covering their financial wrongdoings, and using her as a financial tool. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest, but she remained calm, her breath steady. This was what she had worked for. The moment when the truth would come crashing down, and her family would no longer be able to hide behind their lies. The judge nodded, signaling for the evidence to be presented. Mr. Holloway stepped aside and Rachel stood, walking confidently to the podium. Her hands shook slightly as she placed the folder in front of her, but she steadied herself. She had prepared for this, rehearsed it in her mind 1,000 times. She wouldn't let them intimidate her. Not now. As I have shown in previous evidence, my family has used me as their personal ATM for years. Rachel began, her voice clear and unwavering. They have manipulated me, hidden their actions, and taken advantage of my willingness to help. I have provided the court with all the necessary documents, bank statements, emails, and transaction records that prove this. She opened the folder, presenting the evidence for the court. The judge and the lawyers leaned in as Rachel methodically laid out the details: payments to offshore accounts, hidden withdrawals, and excessive spending on unnecessary luxury items. The room fell into a deep silence as the truth began to unravel, piece by piece. Rachel's eyes flicked over to her family. Alex was sitting with his arms crossed, his face pale but determined. His eyes never left her, his glare sharp and accusing. Emily sat next to him, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, her face a mask of discomfort. John, as always, was the most composed of them all, though Rachel could see the slight tremor in his fingers as he gripped the armrests of his chair. The longer Rachel spoke, the more she saw them squirm. They couldn't hide anymore. The lies were laid bare, and the weight of their deception was pressing down on them, one stone at a time. The amount of money taken from me, the deceit, the manipulation, it's all here, Rachel continued. And I want the court to understand that this wasn't just about money. This was about using me, making me feel like I was the only one who could fix their mistakes while they walked away untouched. They took my trust, and they took advantage of it. Her voice didn't waver, but inside, Rachel felt a strange satisfaction. This was what she had been waiting for. The truth was finally out in the open, and her family had nowhere to hide. Rachel, please. Emily's voice broke the silence, her hands trembling as she stood up, her voice shaky but desperate. This is too much. You don't know what you're doing. You can't just tear our family apart like this. Rachel looked at her mother, her heart heavy with a mix of anger and sadness. For so long, Emily had been the one who held the family together, or so it seemed. But now Rachel could see the truth, that her mother had known about everything and had still allowed it to continue. I'm not tearing the family apart, Mom, Rachel said calmly, her eyes never leaving Emily's. You did that. You let this go on for years, and now I'm making sure the truth is heard. No more lies. Emily sank back into her seat, her face flushed with shame. But Rachel didn't let herself feel guilty. She couldn't. Not anymore. The tension in the room mounted as Mr. Holloway presented more documents, each one a damning piece of evidence. Rachel felt the weight of it all. The years of silence, the years of being ignored, manipulated, and lied to. She had paid the price for her family's mistakes, but now it was time for them to face the consequences. As the session continued, Rachel could see her family beginning to crack. Alex had stopped looking directly at her, his face twisted with a mixture of guilt and anger. John was avoiding the gaze of the judge, his hands gripping the sides of his chair as if he could hold the truth back if he just held on tight enough. But the truth wouldn't be stopped. The judge called for a short recess, and Rachel took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to collect her thoughts. As she walked back to her seat, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Elise, who had been in the courtroom to support her throughout the trial. You're doing great, Elise whispered. They can't stop you now. Rachel nodded, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. It wasn't over yet, but she could feel the shift in the room. Her family was no longer the ones with all the power. They were vulnerable. And for the first time in her life, Rachel felt like she was in control. As the judge returned, Rachel stood tall once more, ready to face whatever came next. But just as she was about to begin, a sudden movement caught her eye. Emily stood up from her seat, her hands trembling as she spoke. "Rachel, please." Emily's voice was pleading now, desperate. "I'll do anything. Just don't do this. Don't ruin everything for us." Rachel's heart wavered for just a moment. She could feel the weight of her mother's words, the guilt pressing in. But she didn't let it stop her. She couldn't. The judge looked over at Emily. "Ms. Bennett, I suggest you remain seated. This is a court of law, not a negotiation." Rachel took a steady breath and faced her family. They were broken now, their last attempt at manipulation crumbling before them. The judge turned his attention back to Rachel. "Ms. Bennett, I'll need you to provide additional evidence. There seems to be a discrepancy in the financial reports. We'll need more documentation to proceed with this case." Rachel nodded, her resolve hardening. This was just another hurdle, another step toward bringing her family to justice. She was ready. As the court session came to an end, Rachel knew the battle was far from over. But today, she had taken a giant step toward reclaiming her life. The truth was out, and there was no turning back now. Rachel stood in the aftermath of the court battle, feeling the weight of the years of deceit and betrayal finally lift off her shoulders. Her family, once so confident in their control, was now broken and exposed. The truth, no longer hidden behind walls of manipulation, had found its way to the light, and the price of their actions was undeniable. The lesson was clear. Injustice does not last forever, and when faced with unwavering courage, the truth will always triumph. It may take time for justice to arrive, but when it does, it resounds louder than any lie. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. In the end, it is our courage and our willingness to expose the truth that shapes our destiny. Call to action. If you found strength in this story of justice and truth, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Comment 1 if you feel inspired by the courage to fight back against injustice. Comment 2 if you believe there's more to the story yet to be revealed. Let us know what you think.